Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about. New Hampshire State Representative and Democratic leader Alexis Simpson spends her weeks in the Capitol trying to move legislation, and her weekends ministering in her community. We talk about how those two inform each other, and why it's more important than ever to have ethical leadership in these troubled times. We also talk about the role of New Hampshire both as a swing state and picker of presidents, what it's like to have presidential candidates show up in your living room, and what every American needs to know about how Granite Staters will evaluate the folks who want to lead our country forward. Enjoy. New Hampshire Representative and Democratic leader Alexis Simpson, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thank you. It's good to be here with you.
I got to start. You're a representative. You're also a clergywoman who's focused on ethics. And at a time when it feels like our government is moving farther and farther away from ethical governance, how do you balance the two, and how do you think about that?
That's a great question. I think about it a lot from a couple different perspectives. The first is that as a clergy person, I get to preach in churches on Sunday and talk to people afterwards. And so I get to hear from them the challenges that they're facing in their lives every day. And that helps me know what I need to do as a legislator. And so that's really important. And that, for me, that's the starting point of my ethics, my sort of personal ethic, like what am I fighting for people for every day in the legislature? It really needs to come from the people themselves. And people are amazingly generous and gracious with sharing their life stories and their struggles with me, which helps me prioritize, which I think is part of ethics, right? Prioritizing what the needs are that we're going to address. And so I get to hear about their struggle, whether a lot of times, of course, health challenges, but then also challenges with just kind of getting through months to months, or trying to find housing or food, and all the challenges that you hear knocking a door as a politician are similar to what I hear from people in the church. But that's part of it for me. And then the other piece for me is that I just have a rigorous personal ethic. And so I refuse to give in to fighting whenever I can with my colleagues, except for the basic needs that our constituents need in a good government, right?
Yeah.
I won't be petty. I believe that every single person is a human person who is entitled to dignity and worth. And I try to look at every new person, including my Republican opponents in the legislature. I try to look at every single person as a beloved child. For me, a beloved child of God. But for a lot of people, just a person who is just naturally imbued with dignity and worth and requiring of respect. And so those are kind of the everyday ways that my ethics play out.
And I guess what gives you hope and what keeps you going? You're the Democratic leader, but you're the minority leader, right, which means that there's policies being moved forward that have profound impacts on the people that are sharing their struggles with you. So how do you what keeps you going and hopeful about governance?
Sure. Well, I often tell people that I'm lucky that I have a strong faith because that's a resource and a really important piece of my life that helps me have faith and hope. So I every day wake up knowing that my history and my tradition and my faith tell me that we continue to work, and in the language of my Christian tradition, we continue to work, especially for the least of these, but we continue to work to make sure that everybody feels a part of society, and that is not. I have a biblical tradition that says that you are not always going to succeed.
Yeah.
There's a Bible full of failures and places where governments have made mistakes and places where individuals have made mistakes and leaders have made mistakes, and also a place where people continue to fight for what's right, even when it's hard.
Can I ask, the Democratic Party, I believe, is so aligned with the teachings of religion to help the least among you, to love thy neighbor. But the Republican Party connects itself to religion in a much more comfortable way. What's been your experience, and what's your sort of advice for the party as it thinks about how to navigate religion and political life?
When I was first, about 10 years ago or a little more, I ran for my first election for the state legislature. And I think either explicitly or implicitly, I felt as if I shouldn't talk very much about my faith. So I talked about my role, of course, as a minister, but I didn't talk about how much it informs my ethics and my public policy decisions and my life. And I think since then, it's part of why I went back and got a degree and a focus on public policy and ethics, because I wanted to find a way to be able to be authentically myself, and which includes, of course, I've been an interfaith minister, so I have worked with people of all different faiths and helping them seek their own path and live into their own religious lives. And so I certainly have worked in secular places as well. But in terms of being my own authentic self, I have really strived in the last few years to be open and honest about the role of religion and faith in my own life, because I think we're a very big and diverse country, and there are a lot of people for whom that's important, and they should know that it's important for their leaders when it is. And I don't think that it's a very good representation to say that only Republicans are religious people or only Republicans have a deep faith. I think that narrative needs to be countered, and we need to, those of us who are religious ought to be bold and unashamed about claiming that.
I love that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself running for office and serving in the New Hampshire legislature, which I'm sure many of our astute listeners know is a large state legislature. So it is a difficult body to manage, operate in, and how'd you find yourself there?
Yes. Well, I don't know if all your listeners know that we have 400 people in our state legislature in New Hampshire, in our state house, rather. We also have 24 senators, but we have 400 state legislators. And I did not grow up thinking that I would be in politics. I did not start my career thinking I would go from ministry to politics, doing both at the same time. No idea. However, when I got involved in some policy and advocacy around local food systems and sustainable agriculture, I realized that in New Hampshire, you can get elected to the state house and you can have a real impact on legislation from the inside. So I had been doing policy and advocacy for farmers and people who support the farming community and local food, mostly on a federal level. But then I took on a local issue, a state issue, and spent a year doing that and was able to work with legislators. And and really loved that. And so I ran for office after that in 2014 and served on the Environment and Agriculture Committee in my first term.
And can you give folks a sense of what it's like in the New Hampshire legislature and some of the things that you've been able to move forward?
Sure. So we call ourselves a citizen legislature because most of us are doing, a lot of folks are retired, but also there are a lot of folks who are working at the same time as serving in the legislature. And we represent a small number, relatively, of people. So we're able to hear a lot from our constituents, talk a lot with them, and we're able to file bills, as many as we want. And every single bill gets a hearing. Now, this can be a challenge because we only have a 6-month session. And this year we have a record number 960 bills filed.
Wow.
Yes. It will be a big challenge for us. I'm not lying. As a leader, I am really, I am anticipating the challenge and trying to be prepared for it. But that's a lot of bills to hear and a lot of bills to understand and ask 400 representatives to vote on, right? And so we rely heavily on the work of our committees. We have 22 committees that hear policy. And so we trust our colleagues on those committees to really dive into each bill and understand the policy and then explain it to the rest of our caucus so that we, because there's just not enough hours in the day for all of us to dive into 960 bills. But with the help of our colleagues, we can at least understand what we're voting on and what the implications of that are. So we have all kinds of legislation that we are facing. But really, in the committees, what we're trying to do is take a problem that someone has found in the state and work towards a solution. These are often issues that are really vital to our constituents, but maybe the average Granite Stater hasn't thought about. I love to tell the story if we have time.
Yeah,
I'd love to tell the story of when I was on the Environment and Agriculture Committee. It was brought up to us that there was a really big issue with getting bison to the slaughterhouse in Vermont. That bison do not travel well, and we don't have a USDA slaughterhouse in New Hampshire. And so we were hearing from people who were saying, why can't we just take care of our bison here in New Hampshire and find a way to have local processors process the meat and not have to go through this really troubling and disabling thing to go across the state lines with the bison. And so we had to work with, and I was really excited about this because we got to bring together our public health officials, right, who were worried about, we need to make sure this meat is okay for people to eat. With our processors and with our farmers, bring everybody together and say, is there a way we can take care of this in New Hampshire where people can have access to bison meat, but that in a way that's sustainable for our state? And we came up with a solution for local processing of bison with enough rules in there so that people would feel safe eating the meat. So I don't know. It's kind of a little story.
It is. It's one of those things when you run for office, you never think that is an issue that you have to understand, navigate, pull people together and problem solve around. But that's the work, right?
Right, exactly.
So can I ask, within the legislature, being a Democratic leader and, citing the famous Will Rogers quote that he's not a member of any organized party, he's a Democrat. How do you, with hundreds of members, part-time, try to keep the party organized and consistent and on message and moving policy goals? And when you're in the minority, it's already a challenge.
Yes, it is a challenge for sure. Especially, we end session in June and then we're off for 6 months. So people aren't regularly in and out of the State House. And so it's even a little bit harder to make sure that people have all the information they need to be talking to their constituents. However, as I said, we have 22 committees. That means we have a big leadership team, right? We have our core leadership team, then we have our ranking members of all of those committees, and our deputy ranking members. And so we try to meet with them regularly so that they understand what we're facing and understand our approach and understand our priorities. And we try to communicate, of course, over email as well, but that's a little harder. We try to get people together when we can, but it's not a perfect science. Bringing 177 people together on Zoom is not, it's just never going to happen that all 177 of us can be on one Zoom. But we try to communicate as regularly with our caucus as we possibly can. And I remind them that we are a big tent. Like even in our state, I mean, obviously this is true across the country as Democrats, but even in our state as Democrats, we are a big tent and we have a lot of the same fundamental values, but we're not going to agree on everything. And that's okay. Like there are big things we have to agree on and we have to come together on, but there are going to be some things where we're not going to agree on. And it's going to be challenging to have conversations when we disagree, but it's up to us to come to some kind of agreement with one another on how we move forward.
What are the big issues that you're looking at facing this year? Obviously, we're trying to manage big federal cuts, chaos.
Yes.
How is that impacting the Granite State?
Yes. So people in New Hampshire are really struggling with basic costs of living, right? That means the cost of housing. We are in the middle of a housing crisis in New Hampshire. I know other folks are facing that as well, but where it's a big problem for people who are trying to buy homes, but also for renters. And it's really hard for people to be able to pay for their housing, and with the cost of food having increased and with the impossible cost of childcare, it's just really hard. And so, thankfully, Democrats really agree that those are primary issues that we should all be addressing. So we continue to look for ways to address those. We have high property taxes that have continued to increase as the Republican legislators and governors over time have downshifted all these costs from the state level to the local level. They have continued to give tax breaks to multimillionaires and billionaires and out-of-state corporations and continue to put the costs on regular, everyday working families. And so we are trying to address those costs how we can, we have a bill this year trying to keep seniors in their homes, even when property tax increases, so as to try to figure out how to navigate that so seniors can stay in their homes when they want to. Aging in place is big now, and we found it's really healthy for those who can do it. So we want to try to make that happen. We also know that childcare providers are struggling to keep their staff, right, and to find staff. And so we have a bill that we're trying to provide grants to childcare centers that will help them retain their staff and recruit their staff. So trying to address some of those basic everyday needs that working families have.
New Hampshire is a swing state. But the Democrats have not held power at the state level for many years. Can you talk about what's the political state of play in New Hampshire right now?
Yes. So we have not had a Democrat in the gubernatorial office in almost 10 years, which has been a big challenge. We have held a majority in the House and the Senate since then, about 5 years ago. But we have been fighting every day to get that majority back in the state House. As you said, it's a purple state. And so we have to constantly be on our toes. We have to constantly be engaging with voters at their doors, in the grocery store, where they're on the soccer field, wherever voters are, we have to continuously be in touch with them so that we know what they want from their leadership and then try to get them to vote for us and try to convince them that we are doing the things that they need. And I think, honestly, our Republican colleagues have done us some favors in the choices that they've made over the last couple of years. I was just visiting, one is a homeless shelter for families and for singles, and then also an organization that helps people in one of our rural counties who are homeless and live in tents and in their cars around the county. But just talking to people all around, and the fact is, the Republicans passed a bill to make it easier to evict people last year. In the middle of a housing crisis, they passed a bill to make it easier to evict people from their apartments and homes. And that's just unacceptable. And we are going to make sure that the voters know that we are doing the things that make it easier for them to find housing, not harder. And the same is true around healthcare and our budget. There were budgetary decisions made by Governor Ayotte and by Republicans in the state legislature that have made it impossible for people. I mean, they have added premiums to healthcare for some of our most vulnerable people in the state that were not there. And it's just unacceptable to make the most vulnerable pay premiums on their healthcare when you're continuing to give these tax breaks to the ultra wealthy. So we are going to continue to let people in New Hampshire know that we are working hard for them, and every day we're trying to bring down the cost of living and trying to address the real problems in their lives.
So it sounds like it's a real focus on kitchen table issues.
Yes.
How much does the national debates shift voter attitudes in New Hampshire in terms of how people are responding to your message?
That's a great question. So we have something this year that we have brought together our priority bills under the Fair Chance agenda. And we are going around the state, to every corner of the state, to talk about our Fair Chance agenda and to hear what issues are on the minds of voters in New Hampshire. And so we are trying to listen for what people care about most. I think there's always, the news is often about the national scene, right? And there's less news about statewide issues, but we're working really hard to inform the press about what's going on at the state level, and we're working very hard to reach people through social media and through one-on-one encounters, and we will continue to knock doors. I mean, there are ways that you can reach voters that the national agenda or the national CUs can't reach voters, but we really can, and so we'll continue to do that. But the fact of the matter is, I'll take, for example, the tariffs. The tariffs that we have on goods right now have made a real impact on people, and now they're on prescription drugs. They'll make a big impact there. And they are just taking more and more money out of people's wallets. And so we also need to make it clear to Granite Staters that we have responsibility at the state to do whatever we can to push back on that. So I actually have a bill to say that the state would withhold payment of whatever money we give to the federal government in the amount that they withhold from us if they were to ever try to withhold money again from the state, as Trump did early in the Trump agenda. And so it's just a way of saying, look, we will take our money and we will put it in escrow and we will give it to the federal government when they give us the money that they have promised us. Because we can't anticipate what will happen in the coming years, but we should be prepared to make sure we are protecting the resources of Granite Staters.
Absolutely. I imagine you will also soon have a lot of presidential aspirants showing up at your state. As holding your place as the picker of presidents. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like for those of us who don't have that rush of people suddenly finding long lost relatives in New Hampshire that they're claimed?
Absolutely. I love it. I love having the opportunity to be in small rooms with folks who want to be president of the United States. It is humbling to have the opportunity to share with them what we're hearing from real people on the ground. I remember, this is now a long time ago, but I remember when I was knocking doors for my first campaign and hearing from people at the doors about the impact of the opioid crisis on their families. And it was heartbreaking, and it was not something that people were talking about yet. And it was not something that we knew how deep the problem was in New Hampshire. And we slowly learned over time. But knowing early from hearing from people in regular conversations, one-on-one conversations at their homes about how devastating this was, meant that then when presidential candidates came through New Hampshire, we could say to them, did you know this is happening? This is a big problem. If this number of people in 2 weeks have talked to me about this problem at their door, this is a crisis and it's going to come your way. And they could really hear that and then take that into their national agenda, And at the same time, I remember taking my, maybe he was 11 at the time, my son to a small round table with a presidential candidate and him having the opportunity to ask a question and being dissatisfied with the answer and expressing that to me afterwards. And it's interesting to me that candidate's campaign never got traction. And I thought, I wonder how many other people had that experience where they didn't feel like this candidate was meeting the moment. And Grand Staters, in their retail politics, we are good at it. And you will know what people are really thinking and needing on the ground.
Yeah. I remember in law school, I drove up to New Hampshire to campaign for Al Gore. And I was not trudging through the snow. I'm a Californian, so I had no comfort in that at all.
Sorry about that.
Knocking on doors. And somebody asked me a policy about some obscure federal tax law that I didn't know the answer to. And I said, well, let me ask the campaign and we'll get back to you. And he's like, no, have Al call me and explain it. And I was like, wow, that's like a real sense of like ownership and responsibility over the presidential candidate.
Yes, people take it very seriously. And we have, thankfully, we have had candidates coming through already who are not talking about their 2028 aspirations. However, they are interested in talking to Grand Staters publicly, which is wonderful for us because it means that we get to bring them to the ground. We get to bring them to the conversation, and we take it very seriously. I have constituents who are exactly like the person that you have mentioned at the door that you met.
Oh, wrapping up, I mean, I think New Hampshire plays an outsized role in our politics, both as a swing state and as an early primary state. Yes. What do people need to understand about New Hampshire to understand its role in our national politics?
That's a big question. Gosh, let me think about that. There's a part of me that says we're not that different from any other place in the country because we are a state where people have a lot of ideas and a lot of feelings and a lot of concerns that they want to talk about and express. And we do the best we can to come together and analyze, our problems and try to come up with solutions. And it's messy and complicated, and we don't always agree whether we're on the same side of the aisle or the opposite side of the aisle, but we're all really committed to moving the state forward. I think it might be that we have a lot more places where we do bring people together. We really value town halls. We have the old town meetings still in a lot of communities, so people come together to vote and to talk about difficult things. I mean, even my ballot in March in my town is like so many pages long. And as a voter, I have to have enough information to decide whether we need to buy a new fire truck. And so that means I better have attended our deliberative session where I will learn how many times the one that's failing has had to be to the mechanic in the past year, right? And so we are very engaged civically, and I think that's unique. I don't hear that from everybody across the country. And I think we have a lot of similarities with people across the country.
when you look out at the next 10 years and you're trying to shape policy going forward, in an ethical way, what are the first priorities that are sort of like the necessary ground level, the necessary ingredients, in order to fulfill that?
For me, the first thing that comes to mind is in a country that is as wealthy as ours and in a state that is as wealthy as ours, there is no reason that we should have as many people who are homeless and who are living in their cars. Is just unacceptable. And we need to figure out how to house everybody. So I think that's a part of our responsibility, and we just have to keep figuring out how to do it. But part of that is going to be that Republicans and Democrats have to break their ties with the biggest money around the country, because the priority has to be in meeting the needs of those who are living in their cars and not those who are about to make $1 trillion, right? Like, that's not our responsibility as the government is to attend to the people. And that means that we also have to support families. I have 2 kids. They're young adults now, but I think it's really important for the future of our country that we continue to invest in our kids. We've got to continue to prioritize public school education. It's our neighborhood schools where the majority of all of our kids are educated, and we need to continue to invest in them, to invest in their well-being, to make sure that they have food to eat so that they can learn. I hope in 10 years that we'll be feeding every child every single meal, 3 meals a day, and lunch at school. So I hope we make those decisions. I hope that we continue to feed our kids however we can, continue to educate them, continue to invest in them and their well-being, because they're the future of our country and they're a valuable gift to us, and we should treat them as such.
I gotta say, I mean, on one hand, you're so right. On the other hand, it's so crazy that we have to aspire to not have hungry kids and people homeless, and not to be investing in education for our future. I think it's a kind of a statement of the world we're in right now, and how off kilter it is.
It is. It's sad, and it can be despairing if we let it be. But I take faith from my 20-year-old who says he's very frustrated with politics right now. You can imagine, as a lot of 20-year-olds. But he tells me, I don't lose hope, Mom, because I don't lose hope in people. And my heart breaks a little bit when he says that, because he's right. People are going to continue to care about other people. We have to not let our politics get in the way of that.
I love that. And I think, that commitment to people is why we love having you in the New Deal, and why I've enjoyed having you on the podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.